This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Benoit Chestnut and normally Sebastian Romero, but he will return at some point. And on this week's Weigh-In, we talk about Jake Paul versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and the exciting news of Jake Paul now the number 14 boxer in the world ranked by WBA. So we have some exciting stuff to go, and the Charles Oliveira getting knocked out. So it's an exciting one for the fans today. So let's jump right into it because our biggest talk is this Jake Paul. So if everybody didn't know, Jake Paul took care of Chávez Jr. and the WBA commission is now taking notice. And they've now ranked Jake Paul as the number 14 in the world. And that's because Zurdo, excuse me if I mispronounce this, but I believe it is in my best correct opinion, the next Jake Paul fight, which is not already scheduled, but we're going to get is Zurdo. So we're going to get, Gilbert Ramirez versus Jake Paul. And this is because it's been the next fight. It's been that, but he's the WBA and the WBO champion currently right now. The problem is Jake Paul's coming for him, and that is what's happening here. And the WBA commission talked about wanting to rank Jake Paul for that reason because they want him to be able to win the belt. And now this is a fight I think we're going to get. I think that, I get that everybody's looking at Gilbert Ramirez and saying, okay, Gilbert Ramirez is 47-1, 30 KOs. But let me tell you, brother, Jake Paul is different right now. That Chavez fight we saw we saw a really good boxing Jake Paul get in that ring. We didn't see a Paul that just was fierce to go hand to hand and knock him out really easily. We saw a Jake Paul that was looking to almost try to box that fight, and that's a newly Jake we've seen. And I think that when you talk about that, I think you talk about in terms of, okay, he's the number 14 in the world right now. And I think if you're Zurdo, I think you get beat. You're going to get beat by Jake Paul. I think Jake Paul's going to go in there and he's going to stop you because Jake Paul will stop at nothing. Jake Paul will stop at nothing to make sure he has a world title for himself because Jake wants to be a world champ. And we've all known that. And we talked about, and one thing we said is if Jake Paul beats Chavez, we may believe he could. I said if he knocked him out, we would definitely believe he could be a world champ. But the boxing we saw from Jake Paul on Saturday night, it told us all we needed to know. Jake Paul can definitely become a world champ right now. If I'm Zurdo and you look at that fight, the way Paul was able to stand up well, I think if you're Gilbert, we're going to say Gilbert instead of what his boxing nickname is. Instead, we don't botch it up. I think the best thing to say here is Gilbert's going to have a tough fight. It's not going to be easy for Gilbert. I don't think it is. I think you're going to have Jake Paul come in there and prove what he wants to do, and that is snatch those belts. You look at Jake has trained really well. You look at when he came in against Chavez, how good he looked. Many thought, well, Chavez is going to come through this and make the difference. Jake looked really good, and I think when you talk about that, you talk about somebody who understands what's in front of them and what they want. And I think when you talk about Jake, you understand that Jake has been wanting to go about this. And you look at the game of boxers that have now been going on. This is now a pattern of boxer. Gilbert Ramirez is a world championship boxer. I think Jake Paul's time of scheduling action sports stars and photographers off left and right, or guys that, you know what I mean, guys that are not, have been rooted in boxing is over. It's over. We're getting boxers now. We're getting exactly what we asked for. And now Jake is at a confident level where I think he's ready to go up against a world champ. I think he's ready to go in there and stack somebody up and take their belts. And I think the best thing we have to prepare ourselves for is, Jake to become WBA champ. He's not going to stop himself at nothing. The question we ask ourselves is, Gilbert also has the WBO. So if he wins that belt, what will happen? And, as I always say, I fact check myself on these epis. And you know what? I'm going to get you an answer on what that would mean. So let's see, what that would mean. So the greatest thing we could say is Jake is going to have a if he's able to get, to beat Gilbert. No, if. Forget if. Jake's gonna beat Gilbert when Jake beats Gilbert. When Jake beats Gilberto, I should say. My apologies. I should have said Gilberto. I'm saying Gilbert. It's Gilberto. But nonetheless, Ramirez. We'll go with Ramirez. When Jake beats Ramirez, I'm telling you, it's going to be interesting. Because when Jake beats him, it's going to make Jake Paul the absolute menace of boxing. And I say that because Jake is ready. He's ready in all shapes and forms. But I say it in so many terms. If you didn't see that Saturday fight, I would say go back and watch it because that was worth it. Fight was on the zone and it was well on worth it. So and that is why I say it was well worth it because he went there and he proved he could handle Chavez. Even Oscar De La Hoya said it himself. De La Hoya said, "Hey, if he can beat Chavez, I believe Jake Paul can be a world champion." So to get you the correct answer, the answer would be if he beats him, he will not win the WBO because he's not ranked by WBO. He will win the WBA if they fight, which I kind of feel like is it's not right. I feel like Jake here. If Jake whoops his butt once, I say this: let Jake whoop his butt once, win the WBA, then he can go again. And when he needs to snatch that WBO, then you put both belts on the line. That's a number two fight, unification bout. All right, all right. That'll be a good fight. That'll be a good fight. I know I'm gonna say the same things I always say on the pod. If I could get it, if I could get a good Ecuadorian boxing card, or I understand we got a lot of boxing that is going on. We got a lot of U.S. fights, this and that. Some of these other countries look so beautiful, and I feel like it's just would be great to line up a huge event over there and just it would look nice. I understand Jake Paul has fought outside the U.S. I mean, not really. He's fought in Puerto Rico, but actually no, he fought Tommy Fury out of the U.S. So I understand that Dana White's getting into some of the out of the U.S. Stuff like that looks really good. I just wonder, there's so many like great places. Like, let's wait till some of these like other great, like Aruba, like when all these other countries get sanctioned with their boxing commission. Man, if we could get an Aruba boxing card, come on. Everybody knows how good Aruba looks. Or a Bahamas boxing card? Come on. Or Barbados? Or Ecuador? Or hear me out here. A good Italian. Let's get one in Italy. A good Italy boxing card. Because Italy and Ecuador are sanctioned. But I just kind of feel like this is the coming of Jake versus Ramirez. Paul versus Ramirez is going to be, I say, hands down a good fight. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when Jake beats Ramirez, now Ramirez is going to have the WBO. Jake's going to want the WBO. WBO may very well rank Jake at that point. He's a current world champ. How can you not? So once he would be a current world champ when he wins the belt. So how could you not rank him? At that point, then Zero's going to want his belt back. Jake's going to tell him, no, you got to put the WBO down. Then Jake's going to whoop his butt again. He's going to whoop his butt again. And when he whoops his butt again, now Jake's going to still have his WBA and then snatch the WBO. And then Jake can go ahead and get the rest of those weight classes. Get the rest of them. Go ahead, get the rest of them. Then Jake right now has got a good path to undisputed. And I say that because look at Ramirez. He has one loss, and he's got let me pull it up. He's got them 30 KOs, but that boxing Jake we saw last night, on Saturday night, he could take a punch. He could take it. He's been there where the guys that kind of stumble him, and you got in there against, Chávez Jr. Chávez family is deep rooted in boxing. And I think this is a really good thing for Jake. For Jake to get in here and say, hey, if I can snatch his WBA, and the commission talked about this. They said, it was a statement, I would say, Google it for the official words, but it was more or less of, hey, if Jake wins this, we're going to rank him because there was beef going on between him and Ramirez. And they say, we want him to be able to win our belt. Why is it fair you're going to face a world champ and you can't even get the belt? So no, we're going to rank him if he wins against Chávez so it's official. Jake Paul's the number 14 right now. And that's just, it's great that he was able to do that. That he was able to get himself to be ranked by WBA. To see the journey of Paul is just amazing to see that he's finally able to be ranked. That Jake Paul is for the WBA, and the WBA commission they're with him on this. They're like, when you're ready to challenge for a world title, it's there for you. And that's going to be good. That's going to be good. All for a belt now, one that, it's going to be good. I think Jake, in the Jake Paul era, as we call it, the party crasher, I think he's done it already. He's done it. But once he gets that belt, now we'll say, okay, he threw a monkey wrench in that weight class. And he's going to do it. And you know what? Jack wanted to face him too. Jack wanted to face Paul too. And it was alleged, it was rumored that he's in talks with Jack. So the difference here is WBA ranked him first. So I know the next fight, we can kind of speculate here. The next fight's going to be Ramirez. Because when you think about that, WBA ranked him, and you can't win a battle unless you're ranked. So he's not ranked by WBC or IBF or WBO. So they're kind of hesitant, but let's let him get that WBA, then you have no choice. You're not going to put your belt sanction a fight against somebody who's not ranked. So I think Jake is going to he's going to force WBC, IBF, and WBO to rank him if he wins the WBA. I mean, not if, when he wins the WBA. No if. When. Because we saw a good Paul. I think Paul has put his mindset to this. You have to understand, this is a a Jake Paul here that's not even like, when I tell you Jake Paul's not even posting on YouTube like that anymore. Jake's not posting on YouTube like that. He is so focused in this boxing. There's no YouTube Jake. It's boxing Jake right now. And that is the best form of Jake we're getting. And that's why I say that this Jake Paul we got right now is going to be interesting. To have a Paul like this, to have a Jake like this, to have, you know, to have all of that to be said. So just absolute amazing thing for Jake. You know, absolute amazing thing for Jake. And I think that's one of the things that you have to say is absolutely crazy for Jake, that he was able to do it. And that's absolutely something great for Jake. So let's go on over to this UFC. This UFC. And we're gonna take a look, and we're gonna talk about this. So let's see. Alexandri was no, that's not it. My brain. Topuria is now the champ. He's champ. As they say, as we used to say with Connor, they say it now. He's champ. So that's a really good thing that he was able to do it. And I would have never thought Charles Oliveira was going to get knocked out that early too. Like, that's crazy. Some stuff you can't make it out. ESPN and then posted the knockout heard around the world. Yeah, it was heard around the world, man. It was heard around that world, man. I just see Topuria, you just absolutely proud for Topuria, and it didn't disappoint. I told you it didn't disappoint, nor did Jake, also on the same night. So you talk about all of that, that was a good things going on with UFC, that they really didn't disappoint. That it didn't disappoint the way you thought. And I think that's really good for terms of um that's really good in terms of UFC, that it didn't disappoint. I think that that's amazing what was going on there, with the UFC. And I think that event was really good. You had Paul, that was really good. I think now a lot of boxing is starting to notice. At first everybody said, "Yo, this is a joke Jake was doing." It isn't a joke anymore. He's now ranked by WBA, and I think you talk about, even some people, when you look at that, I think it was a good weekend of combat sports in terms, because when you talk about Topuria had a good came in. It was a good fight. You get another champ, and I think right now what we're looking at is it's too common. Champs. We're seeing a lot of it, and I think right now it's got to be. I think the reason being is because there's so many organizations with UFC. I've talked about this before, not on here. I talked about it with Sebastian, my partner, that if the UFC would take, because you understand that there's the UFC, there's Bellator, there's all these different organizations that do combat sports. If they would take themselves and turn themselves into a commission, similar to boxing, where you have WBA, you have the UFC commission. Instead of Dana White signing the fighters and trying to make money, be a commission instead, and kind of to go like that, stay a commission, and put your belt again, so that all these belts can come together, because we're seeing champs and in weight classes, and and stuff like that. And I just think it's just really like, I think at some point I'm looking at this and I'm saying, you, that's why you're seeing so many champs right now, because not all the UFC fighters are staying. Some of them are getting PFLs giving them more money, and all these other organizations are paying them more, and they're leaving because of that. And I think, in terms, you want to keep the sobriety, but they have some good, promising talent coming up. They just have not gotten to where they're fighting for belts yet. And when they do, like we talk about Bo Nickel being one of them, we talk about Ryder being one of them. We talk about a lot of guys over there that they're coming up. Patty Pimblett is another rounded guy who is fighting in the UFC. We talk about that, and I think it's going to take some time, and it will get to where it is, where it's like the potential clashes are absolutely like immaculable. The same way you can get to the same way you get to the same way you get to like boxing. Boxing, like when you look at, we talked about that tank weight class, the clashing. Now we talk about that tank weight class. Look at what happened. Belts have been stripped. Tank that has no longer has a perfect record. He's got a draw on there. Lomachenko retired. Like, and UFC's got it. In some of those weight classes, when you look at the potential clashing, you look at it, some of those. And then, I mean, you really had it, and John Jones retired, and everything was just like, oh, man. But I think the UFC is about to start getting better when some of those guys that are just getting in there are going to start getting some record on them. It's going to get good. It's going to get good. I really do. I understand they don't, allegedly they don't make as much. They don't make a lot of money. They don't make well, but I think you got to look at this in terms of why boxing has had a successful model over the years, and that's because the WBA didn't call themselves a promotion and say, okay, this is WBA boxing. You can only be with WBA boxing. No, I think what they did was they did something very They did something very nice. They said, we're a commission. We'll give you your belt. You'll have to find your own promotion to be on and fight on and that and whatnot. And I think that's really good in terms of boxing, is that you have all these great organizations that are giving you the belt. They're not saying, okay, WBA has these fighters and you can only ever hold WBA. I get it. The money is not as much into that, but it just means that it's really good. You terms of boxing, you see how many megastar boxing fights we've gotten over the years. Like, look at what happened. Like, I have a prime situation. Let me tell you this. You ready? When Canelo had his fight, and they had UFC Noches. UFC Noches lost viewership because of the Canelo fight. That tells you where the eyes are at. Now, hear me out. If they were fighting for the PFL belt, the UFC belt, and maybe, another organization, would you have lost all those eyes? Maybe not, because you might have had two belts. You might have had a bigger following. You might. But who's to know what will or what wouldn't have happened? I mean, we always speculate on the way. That's that. I feel like everybody says that's my main thing, and it's so true. The speculation is the most of what we say. That's why we disclaim. Unless I specifically fact check myself on like Epi, I'll always sit here and say like it is what it is, and like to even to like touch base here on this episode. This is episode 60, and I'm gonna fact check myself because I've been doing so many of these. You lose count. But as far as I know, this is episode 60. Like, we're at 60 episodes. We're 40 more from 100. Crazy goal. So let's. We're in the end here almost, and we're kind of just like, yeah, we're on episode 60. Wow, 60 straight. Um, Absolutely amazing. The things that we've been doing, 60 straight. Um, 60 straight epis. That's crazy. 60 straight. Nonetheless, I mean, not really straight, but we're on 60 episode 60. So like it just kind of gets to like, right, like I said, sometimes I'll fact check myself on air, like, during recording, and other times I'll say like, hey, if you want, there's certain situations where I don't explain what happened in terms of what happened. I say if you want to know, you Google it. And I say that because that's just a disclaimer to keep us from, some stuff that it's just in general. I don't go across every situation unless all the facts are there. That's why I say that's why a lot of people wonder why I break stuff so late. I break stuff because I wait for, you know, the first guy to answer, another guy to answer, and for everybody to touch the base with it, so I get more of the picture of what's going on. And nonetheless, to get that first, then to like receive, okay, this is what happened, or that's what happened, or no, now they say this happened. Sometimes I will break stuff early, and that goes to it. I mean, there's an aspect of breaking stuff late, but we're always looking in the right direction. Like we're asking the questions nobody really ever asks, and that's kind of just the way it is in terms of everything. Like there are questions we will ask, there are questions we don't. And I say that because for me, I always ask, like, hey, you know, what's what's the best way to do this and that? And I do that for certain reasons. Like, okay, there are certain situations where, okay, you don't know what's going on. You say, okay, you don't want to put out something and it be wrong. Because when you're wrong, they like to come after you for that. They like to say, hey, when I say come after, they like to, they like to heckle and say, hey, you were wrong about this. That's not true. That's not what happened. I try to keep things accurate for the fans. And I think one of the biggest accurate pieces is I want to make sure that every episode I put out, I can always keep up. And I try to keep from having to take down an episode because, I'm in a streak. I started the beginning of the year wanting to just record. And that's what's been going on right now. And it's been pretty strong. And, just to be like 100% honest, because everybody can see some of the stuff, everybody can see some of the stuff. So some videos do better than others. And I think that's just trial and error right now. We're in the first year of just record. So there's a lot of trial and error in a lot of these videos. And it's like, some of them, it's like, hey, some of them I do. And I say, well, I didn't feel like it was a great vast majority recording. And then I look at the video and I say, you're right. It'll get like 5 views. It'll get like 2 views. And I'll say, hey, maybe that wasn't a good video. But nonetheless, lately, the boxing, like it's a lot of that stuff will happen where they're kind of just like, and that's kind of why I do what I do. Like I put the preview on Instagram for like everybody else so that it's like, okay, you'll know what the episode's about if you look at the Instagram post. And then that's why the viewership is low because I don't kind of do what other YouTubers would do is take the best part and say, oh, this is what it is. No, I kind of just take whatever I see in the beginning and put that as the Instagram for reasons because so the topic. Instead of you look at it, you say, okay, is that something I'm interested in? No, if you're not, you don't look at it. And sometimes it happens that a lot of people are not interested into what I put on. I post twice a week. Some people can get behind. Some people just don't think it's going to be interesting. Or some people are like, you know, there's not much you can talk about that when they see the topic. But even then, like, I do that for various reasons. And the reasons being some of the ones I named, it's easier, to keep real viewers. Somebody looks at Instagram and says, yeah, I want to watch that. That's how I'm trying to keep, get as many vast majority of viewers that want to be here. But in terms of is it fun? Absolutely. Will I always keep doing it? Absolutely. This is the thing where, in the previous years, we didn't put out as many episodes. And now that, like Jake Paul not being ranked, that lives no more. With us not putting out episodes, that lives no more. I will always get an episode out, even when, things may be vast majority, even if I get busy, whether things are that when I'm busy, I will always make sure there's time to put out an episode. I will always make sure that, even like, if some of you haven't noticed, there are a few times I get over busy and my episodes are posted like 4 a.m. It's stuff like that happens. Not often, but it happens. It's not that I don't, you know, it's not like I don't put up an episode. I would never not put up an episode, but I just have to put it up later, due to like being real busy, or just, in terms of editing and stuff like that. It takes longer to export, and some stuff it just doesn't get up. But the goal is always the same: keep running the way and keep doing this and that. And I mean, for you guys, I have always, I for once, use as fans can say this is the most videos I think you've ever gotten in any year. And I think this is going to be the at least. I would say this is going to be the at least, because the terms is like to get better and better and better. And then, branch out. Because we first started boxing content and we branched out to wrestling content. And then now we're still doing wrestling and boxing content. So I think, will it come to branching out? That's an option that may be looked at in the near future. But in terms of just updating you guys and the little, the little, how does it, the always so simple question, how does it feel doing this, and what's the, and what's the glam part? The glam part is getting on here, posting, and seeing you guys comment and say, certain stuff, and that's the best part. So for me, I enjoy it. I will always enjoy it. And with that being said, this is yet another episode of The Weigh-In. This is episode 60. Not that big, but the one thing that I think I will say I have lacked on is getting guests on here. And I think I'm going to already say that'll be next year's better resolution. Obviously there's still time this year to get good guests on here, but I'm going to definitely, like, next year do a lot better on getting guests on here and do more reaching out and doing better on that. But nonetheless, this is The Weigh-In by Benoit Chestnut and then Sebastian Romero, but he will return at some point. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Weigh-In out.